What's up, Tyler?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Not too bad. Little busy day.
A little busy day.
You know, dressed up,
ready to
going
go.
on a date. Going on a date.
You got a blowout?
I got a blowout. I got my first blowout going to the Jersey Shore.
So apparently it's not called a blowout. A blowout is when a girl gets her hair blown out, and a guy when they have a blowout, it's when they look like Pauly D.
Yeah, I think so.
So
I don't have a blowout,
yeah.
but I'm thinking about it now that you said that.
For everyone that's listening and not seeing Tyler, he does not look like Pauly D. He's way more slick than that.
Damn. Thanks, man. Thanks.
No problem. It's mainly because you're really white and not so tan.
Yeah, that's true. But I could always get a spray tan.
You could.
I'd probably do it myself with my my pump, my airless.
Your what is it, a Wagner?
Better my HVLP. I'll figure it out.
Your Titan
Can't
sprayer.
be that hard.
I don't think it. I mean, I think it's just what you put in the can, right?
Yeah, should be good.
Would you have Rachel do it?
Nah, I'm just trying to figure a way to do it myself.
Automatic?
I can't be subbing that out.
You know, like a little,
Yeah.
like you have like a little remote that you just pull.
Make a booth, just spray it in, then run in there, run out.
You know who? That reminds me of what is it, Doodad or something like that. He's like big on YouTube, but he built this thing where he wanted to not help his kids put sunscreen on, so he built this like PVC contraption that they would walk in, and they would stand on it with their feet.
That's actually a pretty good idea.
And it sprayed all the sunscreen around them, so they just had to stand in it and just jump on it. I mean, it's like he does like all these silly pranks and things like that. I actually think that Chip and Joanna may have given him a show on their network. I think it's called Dude Dead. But either way, we should get him on the podcast, but we don't have him today. We don't. Loren Wood from Loren Wood Builders.
Second time. He was on episode 144 back in November 2020.
And back in that episode, he talked about scaling from 2 employees to 50. And today we're going to talk about the benefits of setting your company up design build, because since November, he's went from having 0 design on staff to now he has 9. So
and what he said, he has like 65 employees now?
65 employees, 9 of them in the architecture side, and he said it was the single most what did he say, pivotal moments in his industry?
Yeah, he said basically like,
or I mean his company.
It was one, if not, the most important decision that he made within his business, to kind of bring that on board and handle that process entirely.
And towards the end of the episode, we dig into education, because the whole side of, he's got electricians in-house, he's got carpenters, he's got painters, now he has architects. And the one thing that I struggled with and we dig into is the lack of education and the struggle of education. There's all these people that want to be in this industry. How do we actually get them into a program or an understanding on how to start at step 0 and make your way through to an enduring career?
Yeah, it's interesting. You ask that question or even shed light on that topic, and it's almost one of those things that nobody really considers or has considered as it being a viable option. It seems so unbelievable that potentially could be a thing. So it's interesting to hear kind of people's response to that, and I would beg that a lot of people are going to be hesitant to hearing that and then get off the podcast and start thinking about that a little bit more and be like, well, if that were the case, maybe this would help. My life would be, he even kind of started backtracking a little bit on what he said when given 5 minutes to start thinking about it a little more. So I think at first that's just it. You're almost in disbelief to even consider that, but that could potentially be something that would be very helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah, and honestly, guys, listen to this episode. We would love if you could share on your story what you would like to see in the education world for this, for getting into the trades. Is it hands-on training? Is it digital training? Is it courses? Is it vocational schools? Is it college programs? I'd be curious to see what the general audience would consider.
I mean, even, events like you just held
Yeah.
kind of longer weekend events, where it's like a builders group together. Obviously, there's a ton of options that we'd like to consider there.
Yeah. Let's get into it. Last time we talked about you scaling, and you went from 2 people to 55 people. Where are you at today?
I think we're at about 65.
So that must have been right at the beginning of kind of COVID, for if it was in November. So we were probably talking about that and scaling. So looking back, you continued to grow. Let's talk about what the last 2 years or year and a half have looked like for you.
Yeah, so we've been growing quite a bit, but more so like vertical integration type growth. I mean, in some ways, I feel like we've gotten smaller in that we used to have 7 project managers. Right now, we are at like 4 to 5. So fewer jobs, fewer people running jobs, but largely bigger jobs, and then we're doing more of the work on each of those jobs. So so in a nutshell, we've been growing, but not necessarily in terms of trying to grow our revenue or capture more work. Rather, we've just been trying to refine our processes and bring in house more of what makes us effective and try and hone in, like everybody, trying to hone in on the jobs that make sense for their operation.
I had this conversation a couple weeks ago about, scaling doesn't necessarily mean growth in the sense of quantity, whether that's people, whether that's revenue, whether that's profitability. I think scaling and growing your business can be looked at it from a quality perspective, where I think that's kind of what you were just touching on, is that yes, you grew, you added 10 more people, but it wasn't necessarily to grow the revenue or take on more work. It was more about refining, being able to have the people in place to refine the process in which you get there. Is that right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think if anything, I feel, I've always been aware that growth is dangerous, especially unchecked, just haphazard growth for growth's sake. And somehow we've still managed to grow in spite of me trying to keep a handle on unchecked growth, but I've not wanted to grow my revenue per se, and I'd say the last 3 years our revenue was very steady. I mean, we were almost within $100,000, the same amount of receipts, for the last 3 years running, and this year it's probably going to be higher just because of inflation and the cost of things is higher, but we're not looking to do necessarily more work than we've done in the past, and I feel pretty comfortable in this range. But I definitely want to continue to grow professionally. By growth, I guess in that sense, I mean just get better.
When you say, so if revenue doesn't change and you're adding more people, does that necessarily mean that your profit is shrinking as you're growing, or?
No, not necessarily. I think, and maybe I'm not smart enough to answer that question. But no, I don't think so. We're just doing more of the work in-house. So whereas before more of it was subbed out, for instance, we used to sub out all of our paint, and then we brought some paint in-house, and we've grown the paint crew. We're doing different types of work, and ideally the work that we're doing now is more profitable than the work before. I mean, revenue's never been a really impressive number to me. You can do $20 million in revenue and not make any money.
Right.
So, I'd much rather focus on doing quality work and having my margins be consistently, what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, I think that's what you would end up having to adjust or kind of targeting would be your profit margin. If you're bringing that stuff in house, it's either you don't want to be losing money on that. So it's either it has to make a higher quality product, create less issues, or make you more money, or maybe the three, which
Yeah.
would be nice.
And, something that I think is those of us who have care deeply about what we're doing, I think profitability is just one measure of success in the business. And so certainly profitability is important. It's important to staying in business and staying relevant and you know being healthy as a company, but that's not the only measure of success. So growth, that's why when I think about growth, I'm not thinking about are we making more money next year than we were this year or last year, but how can we improve our operation and our um, you know client satisfaction, employee satisfaction. How can I feel better about myself and my job and what my future looks like here?
And what is your? I know that we had spoke about this last time too. You have electrical in house. What is your reason right now for kind of switching things? And if you're handling more in house than you were, 2 years ago, is it primarily quality driven?
Quality of experience for us and for the client. I don't know necessarily like quality of work. I think with the carpentry, yeah, it's quality. It's craftsmanship. Um, and really with paint and electric too, which are the other two key trades that we have in house. But there's some really good painters out there who we could hire for one job, or one or two jobs, but then we're in line, with all the other builders and homeowners that they're working for, and maybe if we work with them all the time, we get a little more of their bandwidth. But like, and I think I mentioned this last time, but the one, when we brought the electric team in house, it was just eye opening how wonderful it was to just have them at our beck and call all the time. I mean, this morning, I was on a job site. We brought the electrician. I brought two of my design team, project manager, the carpenter. We're all brainstorming, and we scheduled this meeting last night, and everyone's there, and we make decisions. And I couldn't do that with an out-of-house architect, an out-of-house electrician. I mean, I could try, but even if I could do that, it would feel. I don't think I'd feel comfortable doing that, saying, hey, I realize it's 8 o'clock tonight, but tomorrow morning at 8:30, I'd like to meet on site, drop whatever you had scheduled for the morning and come, service my project.
How do you balance?
So
And this is something I've struggled with is your in-house guys, say like your in-house painters, they're doing all, they're working for you, and then you get this other job where you end up subbing that out, and it's a really cool job. And it's like, what's your balance between what your guys do and what you sub out?
How do you mean balance?
I guess specific to what I've dealt with in the past is that my guys have wanted to do the cooler side of it, and or like they feel as though they bust their ass on some of the more brunt work, and then when we get to the sexy stuff, sometimes we have to sub that out from, just from a schedule perspective, or we need to increase bandwidth, or we don't have enough people that we could put everyone on it. And also, frankly, education is another, we don't have, sometimes we don't have the skill set or the entire skill set in order to execute it within our budget. So for me, I can't, this is where I'm so focused right now. My business is rebuilding our carpentry division, but doing it in a way that I can educate them and really grow it into a more profitable endeavor. And I think we can talk about profitability at a later point. But right now, I'm curious have you had a situation where your team, was disappointed that you didn't use them to do something and instead hired it out because of some sort of reason, some sort of strategic business reason?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that happens every once in a while, but I think we're in a little bit of different situations in that I work in what's really a pretty small market with not a lot of subcontractor options. So, I can't, if we have a high-end paint job, like my team's doing it. There's no, I don't mean this pretentiously. I wish there were people out there who were better than us who I could hire. I'd hire them immediately. It would cost me less and it'd be easier. But those people don't exist, or if they do, their bandwidth is so narrow that I can't get them on my job anyway, or they're backed up so far that I don't want to get them on my job. So it happens pretty rarely where I would hire someone else out because they're better able to execute. And now I will say that when that does happen, like I don't have tile in house. I mean, we have a handful of people in house who can do tile. I used to do tile on our jobs 10 years ago. But the tile guys that I'm able to hire and that we have been working on my jobs for years are better than anybody on our team, and it works really well to have them as subcontractors. So, I've got a carpenter who probably listened to this episode who's on my team who's been advocating for me to try and bring a particular tile guy in house, but I've been hesitant to because nothing's broken there and they're able to do it well. But to your particular question, it doesn't come up very often because the high-end work is the work that we have to do if we want to execute it at the level that people have come to expect from us.
And your painters are only painting your projects?
Only ever painting our projects.
Would you ever consider opening like a separate painting company to feed more work?
No, because we can't even hire enough painters to serve our own projects. I mean, we still hire subcontract painters. We still hire subcontract electricians. Now, my paint lead and my electric lead still oversee those jobs. So in my mind, it's still a better scenario for, say, me as a project manager, in that I've got Dan Nipstein, my paint guy, overseeing this crew over here and, maintaining quality control in a way that I didn't have when I was just subbing it out myself. But I've not been able to hire enough painters in-house to do our work. So the concept of having a big enough team to do others just beyond my imagination. I don't want to have a 100-person deep company.
I mean,
that would be a separate company.
I don't want to, though.
You're reducing the size of your company and starting another one.
From the government standpoint, it's all the same. For a long time we tried to stay under 50 because your healthcare requirements changed after that, and we felt like we couldn't afford to go above it. And this is not relevant to what you just said, but we decided that we needed to add some people to our team, and we bit the bullet and now have full health coverage, and it hasn't been detrimental in the way that we thought it was going to be. So we aren't limited by that 50-person cap, but I still don't really want to get to a place where I don't know everybody's name and don't feel like we have this still.
It's funny when you talk about the healthcare thing, because I remember at one point we increased our healthcare, and you look at the numbers and it's like, man, I don't know how we're going to afford that. Like, that's so much extra money. And it was the same thing. We end up just biting the bullet and doing it. And I think I thought about that additional cost for that 1 week. And then it was just, I never thought about it again. It was just, it was just going to be part of the, weekly payroll expense. And it's like, and at the end of the day, it was the right thing to do for my team. And the cost, it's like, you kind of just figure it out. I think about the same way, I've talked to people that don't take a salary from their business because they're afraid that they can't afford to. And they just take money when they can. Like, especially when you first start out, like younger kids or younger people or younger in business in general. But it was the same thing for that years ago. And I didn't take a salary. I had different draws, and I was just taking as needed to survive. And I remember my accountant saying that, hey, we need to set you up on a salary and just get this into motion. Because the moment you get a check on a weekly basis, you're just not. It's not going to be an issue. It's a non-issue. Because you look at that number as holistically throughout the whole year, but when you break it down into 52 payments, it's a relatively small number, and your business adapts to be able to afford that.
Both those things are so true, because I went through both those same experiences. I think it was the 4th year I was in business before I paid myself a salary. It might have been the 5th year, but it loomed large. And then once I did it, it was just done. And I never really thought about it again in terms of whether I should or shouldn't be paying it. And then same with healthcare. We really agonized over that. But the moment I did, I was just so glad and proud to have, felt like that more so than anything has made me feel legitimate as a company. Before then, when we would be interviewing a new person and they'd ask about our healthcare coverage, I was embarrassed that we didn't have full coverage. But you're right. I've not once thought back, looked at our monthly expenses and said, can we really afford this? So for those of y'all listening out there who are on the fence, I'm glad I did it.
This podcast is brought to you by Duration Molding and Millwork. So Boral beveled siding, custom moldings, profiles. They have stock moldings, sidings, corners, all ready for delivery. They turn around proposals real quick, and they get this material even faster. We're working on them for our project right now in Needham. Almost that entire house is wrapped in Boral. So excited to get some custom profiles made. Steve Teak has designed some massive brackets for supporting a lot of these overhangs, and get them over to Duration, and they're going to be working on shop drawings for us. And we're not going to order them now because we're just coming out of the hole, but we only need a few weeks to get those things turned around in their shop and delivered to us.
Yeah, they just posted something on their Instagram page a couple days ago that shows them milling true exterior siding, like a V-groove siding, and it shows it coming out of the machine. And they have it down to a science where there's no dust anywhere in sight. The board's coming out perfect. There's no dust on the floor. I'm like, that is a legit shop setup.
I want to see that dust collection.
Yeah, it's insane. There's nothing, and I'm like, I feel like a wood shop would have more dust.
I know our shop has more dust.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out on their page. It's Duration Molding and Millwork on Instagram.
And for more information on their website, durationmillwork.com. Podcast is brought to you by Reno Run. So they are building materials exactly when you need them. Oversized orders, we got you. So we've been using them for the small orders, the onesie twosies, something we forget. Rather than running to the box store and wasting 3 hours of our day doing that, I want our guys on site. So Reno Run's been a huge partner for us to make sure that when we do need something, we're not leaving the job site. We're able to supervise what's going on, keeping production and quality control at its highest, and Reno Run's handling getting that material onto our job. And we're going to be exploring the oversized big orders here in the future. But they, big, large, extra large, they're totally equipped to deliver any size order.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about it before, but it's the company and what they're doing. It doesn't matter if you're a one-man show, if you have, like Loren, 65 employees, there's a use for this at one time or another, or religiously to be using what they're doing. Because especially if you're a one-man show, you think, I'm going to stop on my way home or skip out some time with the family, or you need something. It's like we can bounce around. You can put off whatever you're doing for a couple hours till the next day, get an order there. You don't have to run out. So, just because you're a smaller company or even a larger company where you have people on hand, don't think that there's not a use for something like this.
No, it's super easy to use. You download the app, you do it all right there. They've made it super easy, for anyone to use. And all of my guys, like I said, have it downloaded on their phone. They get their own account manager getting this stuff ordered, stuff to their job site in just a few hours. If you guys want free delivery, podcast.renorun.com/Modern Craftsman. Delivery's on us for the first one. This podcast is brought to you by Rockwool. So if you guys are serious about, understanding, craftsmanship, better techniques, learning about better materials, and ensuring that your homes are comfortable, beautiful, efficient, and built to last, then you should be checking out the R-Class program from Rockwool. It's a partnership program. It really is designed to help, funnel good information. And this is beyond just using Rockwool's products. They've been a huge help to us on all of our builds. And understanding, when we should be using Rockwool, and when we can, if it's not going to meet, a particular R value, they're able to walk us through the best practice and how to achieve the R value, and even hopping on a Zoom call with our architect as well as us to make sure that everyone's on the same page and we're achieving what we're set out to achieve.
Yeah, it's nice. even, I think that using their product, there's fire resistive properties to it. In my opinion, easier to work with than fiberglass, but also something you forget. I live in an old house. It's quiet. There's thick walls. It's made with lath and plaster. You don't have hollow doors. It's just a quiet house. And even using rock wool in your exterior walls or interior walls, like the sound insulation that has too, is so much better than other insulations that are out there on the market. So it serves many purposes. That's just another one that's a plus of using their product.
Yeah, and when you guys do sign up for the R class, if you want to, head over to www.rockwool.com/R class. They're going to send you a welcome kit. It comes with a serrated knife, gloves, I believe a flannel T-shirt, if I remember correctly, and some protective equipment. But go over, sign up, get your welcome package, and there's even a rebate program to earn money back. This podcast is brought to you by Upstate Merch, quality-focused screen printing, embroidery, and graphic design shop in Whitney Point, New York. If you guys don't know who they are, you should head over to our Instagram page and see the link in that page. They do all of our swag. So if you guys are looking for giveaway shirts, embroidered hats, safety wear, polos, hoodies, and you're just looking for top-quality garments to outfit your team, well, Upstate Merch has you covered.
I know that this isn't necessarily Upstate Merch brand exclusive, but I don't know how I didn't follow Dylan on Instagram before, and all he posts about is like grilling, mowing lawns, good music. But that's Dylan from Upstate Merch. If you check it out, it's just a little behind the scenes. I don't know what is it. Dylan at Upstate. I don't know his exact. Or Dylan, let me look it up. But it's a little Upstate period Dylan, DYLAN. But that's the owner. And it's cool to see a little inside peek at what he does on a daily basis and kind of the personality behind the company, because I think that is important when you're hiring a small business. There's people and personalities and families behind that, and obviously there's a lot of people involved that make that ship sail, but he's the one at the helm right now.
Yeah, and if you guys want 10% off your first order, make sure you email Dylan. You can get a hold of him, print@upstatemerch.com. Yeah, the only thing I probably should have done in that moment when I changed it is probably let my accountant know, because she called me. She goes, for some reason they took out almost double the amount this pay period. And I was like, oh yeah, I made this decision to up the health care. And she's like, Nick, you need to tell me this kind of stuff. I was like, we're just going to figure it out. We're just going to, we're going to get it into place and roll with it.
You ever consider what you have to integrate, or kind of what sort of company structure you have to, like, when making a decision like that? Like, hey, I mean, just in general, like, it's, hey, I want to have healthcare for our entire team, whether it's a dozen people, 100 people. That's a big nut, and that obviously is going to go into the operating costs of your business. And it's not like, oh, I can sell this many more jobs. That's not necessarily something, although I'm sure it would be important to a lot of people, that is going to sell a job for you, where it's like, hey, our customers all have health benefits here. So what, like, in making a decision like that, how are you structuring businesses just to get there?
Well, I'd say that we're already, in our community, I'd say we're widely considered to be the most expensive builder in town, which used to rub me the wrong way, but now it rubs me the right way. At least people expect us to be expensive, when they come to talk to us. But, I think that if you can point to where you add value, I think it's easier to explain pricing and costs, and you guys talk about this with a lot of your guests, so I don't think we need to dig into that, but I think that offering a living wage and a benefits package that's comprehensive is really easy to explain. But frankly, people are coming to us, we're in a small town, and we're easily the most comprehensive. I think far and away well, I don't want to
toot your own.
That. I've got competition. We're good, and everybody knows that we're good, and I think that we don't have to sell ourselves very highly. Like you guys, my sales approach is more just trying to figure out which jobs we want to take and which ones we don't. It's not out there beating the bushes trying to find someone who's willing to hire us. And I've not had a conversation with the client since we started offering health coverage, telling them that we offer health care. We just decided it was the right thing to do, not just because we wanted to go over 50 people, but because we felt like it was the right thing to do. And so, we decided that we're going to, well, for one thing, I talked about this last time, but profit sharing is a big part of our compensation. And so, one part of the conversation was, well, is this going to affect profitability? Maybe, but if it does, if we're not able to pay out as much in profit sharing, but our employees are both making a living wage and they're protected from catastrophic health incidences that don't, rocket them into poverty, maybe that's a better scenario than having this windfall at the end of a quarter or at the end of a year. So for one, I felt like it was worth it, even if it did impact profitability in a significant way. And then two, our discussion was, well, if we need to raise prices, if we see that we take such a hit that, it's untenable, then we're just going to raise our prices more.
I think
so that's what we said, and
I think that with everything that's going on in the kind of the state of the economy right now and how crazy the construction market is and the shortage of qualified help, it's going to become more and more common, even if it's not providing the healthcare but giving somebody a stipend for it. Where it's like, hey, not necessarily giving you a raise, but covering whether it's a vehicle or healthcare, where it's like you have to bring more to the table if you want the qualified help than ever before.
Well, that's huge, and I think over the course of the last 2 years, I've seen a lot of my competition in town, and also some of our subcontractors. I had a meeting this morning with my excavator on site, and his son works with him, and his son's friend, and other than that, he doesn't have any help. And we were talking about it, and he was talking about what he used to pay help and what they're asking for now, and he just can't get people. And I hear that a lot, and that's not something we've come up against. We have people sending us resumes all the time, and I think a big part of that is they see and hear through the grapevine that we treat people well, that we pay them well, and we pay a living wage. And I feel like more and more, I think younger people entering the job market, especially in the recent, climate, that they're in order to get people who are at the top of their game, you definitely have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for people who are getting into this now. I think that the starting wage is more appropriate. I know the cost of living has gone up too, but I look at what help is getting paid right now, and I'm like, when I started my business, that's pretty much what I was charging for myself. And that's what help costs you. And if you aren't willing to foot the bill and kind of bite the bullet and pay that, those people are going to go elsewhere, and you can't blame them.
No, and that's
like, there's an opportunity for these people to make more money and have a better work environment, and we're not getting rich doing this, and if they can support themselves in a healthier way, why wouldn't they go do that?
I think going back to being able to afford health insurance and afford to profit share and things like that, and it does come, and Tyler, to your question earlier, it comes back to setting up the business that way. And Loren, you said that basically told the clients that the price is now more, like, you're already expensive, now you're more expensive. And for us, that's been a real big exercise over the last couple of years, is truly understanding what it costs to do a project, and really sit down and understand what is a job cost, like what does this project require, and that project requires me to pay a particular individual a set, a base rate, but also be competitive with the market, in the senses, if I want these people to stick around, I also need to offer them the benefits. I also need to have a 401k in place. I have to have these things in place. Otherwise, I'm not able to offer my client a high quality product, because I'm not able to retain the necessary talent to do that. And when we started looking at it like that, we started understanding, hey, this is a job cost. So that 401k, that health insurance, that truck that he drives, all of that is part of his hourly rate. that is a package that is billed to the job at an hourly rate. And when you start looking at it like that, you're able to kind of bucket this money in a way that the business can afford to do it.
I think you feel more justified in charging that rate. And, it's not like you have to explain anything to anyone, but if you're seeing where those numbers are coming from, it kind of validates it for you. The other hard thing, Nick, if you think about it, smaller companies, owner-operators, a lot of them aren't integrating the 401k, the health insurance, the proper payment and overhead structure into their business for themselves. And then you expect them to do that with an employee, where they're not even putting money aside for themselves. And I think that's really tough to bridge that gap.
And I think we can all attribute the hardest employee to hire is that first one, because it's so you go from making a bucket of money and however long it takes, you end up with the same amount of money. But the moment you have an employee, the longer it takes, the less money you have. Because you're paying for every hour out. But I think it's the same thing with these benefits, is that the hardest thing to do is get that in place for that first employer or for your employees. But the moment it's in place, then you take advantage of it, and then you realize these are all things that I should have, and it's because it's basically forcing you into understanding it. I've said it before, the best piece of advice I've ever gotten from setting up our business financially was we printed out our entire expense report for the year and went through, and I had to decide that each of my expenses, whether it was a requirement for me to run my business or a requirement to complete a job. And when I went through and realized that, hey, this, that truck that I have, that my carpenter drives, that's not a requirement for me to be in business. That's a requirement for him to get to the job that we're paying, that someone's paying us to do. And it's that's a job cost. And it's software and insurance was another one. Software, it's I wouldn't have Procore if I didn't have any projects. And so why would that be an overhead expense on my end? Because if it's the overhead, it should just be what it's required to be in business. And when we started looking at that's when that was explained to me, it gave me the opportunity to audit how we were billing our clients. And exactly what you just said, Tyler, is when you're able to justify the cost that goes into completing a project, it makes more sense, not only to you, which it's important to make sense to you because you need the confidence to believe in it, but then the client understands. Loren, you said being able to point value at what you're doing, and that value being tied to the financial implication of the job, the cost of the job, someone as long as they appreciate the value that particular thing brings to the project, then they become your client. And if they don't, they're not your client.
Yeah, and I think it just takes a while for me as a person, as a business owner, and as a builder. It took me years to, like you, to understand what my job costs were and what the heck it costs to do what we do. Several years of not making any money to realize it costs more than what I'm charging. But and I think just to get the sophistication and the confidence to say, look, this is what it costs to run the business that I run. If we don't bring enough value for you to be willing or able to pay this, then we're not the right builder for you. And there's other builders out there who, for whatever reason, I no longer even, I don't criticize other people in the community. I just say, here are some other builders that you might want to reach out to. Maybe they have different cost structures that allow them to be more competitive for you, but here's what it costs for us to do what we do. And I don't feel, I've come to the point where I don't feel like I need to make apologies for who we are and for what it costs. I've seen enough other people come and go to recognize that however much I think we should be charging, we're probably still not charging enough.
What
So,
I think one of the biggest differences and why I think a lot of people struggle with it is because they start the business as an owner operator. They're in the business, they're working in the business and on the business. So when they don't have supervision called out because they're on site anyway. They're working as a carpenter and they're overseeing subs, and they don't have a separate line item for a site super or a project manager because they don't have that. But when you grow, like if and when you grow your business, how your cost structure has to change. So, we do the same thing where if, our management is very expensive, but it's very in depth. We have dedicated supervision to our jobs. We have dedicated project manager. Like there's a big cost to that, but we're partnering with clients that demand that. They want really good communication. They want really good oversight, and the projects require it because of the amount of detail. But if someone called me and said, hey, we want to do this project and it doesn't require that amount of supervision, I can, we talked about this last time, like with Mike Telich this week or last week, that he would do a powder room, but the cost of managing that powder room would be astronomical. And, it would probably be better served by someone like an owner operator, where it's like they are less expensive. And I remember exactly where I was. I got a call from a client that I had done crown molding room by room in their house for years. I built them a shed. I did a bunch of like exterior carpentry work on their home. They were my favorite client. When they reached out, it was like I dropped everything and was like, yep, no problem. I'll get you on the schedule immediately. And I remember them calling me when I had just started hiring people. I had 2 carpenters, and it was me and 2 carpenters. And they reached out and they said, hey, we want to do another room with crown molding. Can you give us a price? And I priced the job. And they called me and they said, Nick, why is this so expensive? I was like, oh, hey, we're growing. We're I have some help now, so I'm gonna send my carpenters over there. They're really talented. They're actually better carpenters than I am, and we're gonna get this done. And they didn't value that. They valued the price point that I was when I was an owner operator. And I was so offended in the moment that I was like, why wouldn't they support me growing as a business?
Yeah.
And looking back, I realized that they liked me. They had no issue with me. But the reason that they worked with me is because I was inexpensive, because I didn't have any overhead. And I had to get to the point where I appreciate that. They're no longer my client because my business has changed. My structure has changed.
for me, I think it's not only whether people are value our work and our outfit and philosophy and whatever. I just looked at a deck job for parents of my realtor and a good friend of mine, and we've renovated my realtor's house several times, and these people really wanted to hire me to replace the Trex on their deck next to their pool, and it's a small deck. I met with them. I brought over a carpenter who used to work for me and now is running his own business, and I put them together and we talked it through, and I said, look, I could do this for you, but I'm going to have to charge enough, to pay my overhead, my outfit, and you're going to have to wait 2 years because that's what our lead time is right now. Or Garrett can do it for you, and he can start in a couple of months, and his overhead is far and away different from mine, and he can charge much, much less and still make the same amount of money. He's the right size for your outfit, for your project rather, and I just don't feel comfortable even quoting it. And they appreciated that. They wanted the job done well. They trust, I felt like I was doing a community service for them and looking at the project, and I was helping Garrett, line up more work for his sort of budding company. But I think for me, I don't think about it as, I used to also get offended, when people push back against price. But now I just feel like, we're just not the right size for everything. And recently we've shifted. We now are doing all of our design in-house, and that's been a big part of our growth in the last 2 years, 3 years really, has been in the design team, which went from 0 3 years ago to now 9 people in there.
9?
And so what, it doesn't make sense Yeah, it doesn't make sense for me to build a deck or do a deck.
Right.
Like what? That's not the team that we've built. That's the wrong size. If I'm taking a deck job, I'm shooting myself in the foot and my team in the foot, because that's not the operation that we've built. I'm charging too much for this deck, and I'm doing it instead of doing some job that does make
Right.
sense. And so when I talk about pricing to my clients, I don't make apologies. I say, here's the design, here's the cost that we're going to charge for the design on your project. And if they push back on that, I explain it. And if they continue to push back, I think, well, that's a sign that we're not really the right outfit for you guys, or you're not the right client for us. And that's like a litmus test. I don't get offended, but
I was gonna say, why did you bring design in house? And you alluded to that in the email as well, that this has been one of the biggest improvements to your business. So I'd love to unpack that.
single biggest like transformation. So, you know, again, we live our greater Monroe County areas. So Bloomington is, I don't know, 70,000 people. I don't know if that includes university or not, but it's a pretty small town. The county at large is maybe a couple 100,000. I'm probably butchering those numbers, but 100 to 200 in the whole county. We're not a big place. There's a handful of architect firms that we worked with over the years, and they did great work, and we had great relationships with them. I built relationships with one team in particular who did 90% of our jobs. But as our company grew and as the industry got busier we started in the last recession. So when I first started, all the subs and architects were hungry for work and, eager to do our projects. But as the housing market got better and our company grew, those architects got busier and busier. And there came this point maybe 4 years ago when, our team was big. We were calibrated to do the amount of work that we'd been doing for, winding up to over the previous couple of years. And we had all these clients who were waiting in the wings to do their projects with us, but they weren't ready to go because the architects hadn't gotten construction drawings yet. And so we had this sort of crisis moment several years ago where we had a really bad year because our projects weren't ready to start. All of our projects were waiting in lines with architects who were busy working with other builders and other homeowners. Understandably, they weren't beholden to us. And so we had this sort of come to Jesus moment where we're like, whoa, we don't have the supply chain in terms of the architecture in our little town to keep us busy. And so, it just, timing was perfect. We had a talk as a company, and we said we think we should hire an architect. And there was one in particular, Ernesto Castaneda, who I'd worked with from day one. He had been with another firm locally, and then he went out on his own. He had kids, and his wife was a professor, so he decided to be the stay-at-home parent while his kids were young. And he did, just ran a small firm out of his house. But his kids were now in school full time, and so I reached out to Ernesto and I said, hey, we're looking to bring someone in house. I don't mean to offend you or anything, but if you'd be willing to consider it, we'd be thrilled. And he said, sold. When do I start? And initially, it's been wonderful. Ernesto is such a huge part of our team, and I just can't say enough great things about him as a person and as a worker and as the head of our design team. But initially, we brought him in, and I said, Ernesto, we've got these relationships with Spring Point Architects and, with Susan Yaley and these other folks in town. I don't want to disenfranchise those guys. I said, all I really need for you to do is to design enough work to keep our team busy, to fill in the cracks around what, these other architects are doing for us. And he said, no way, I want to do all your work. And it's like, there's no way you could do all of our work. But he wanted to, and that was his mentality from the moment he came on board. He's like, I don't want to fill in the cracks. I want to do this all in house. And immediately, like, I remember right after we hired him, the brother of my HVAC guy bought an office down the street, and he said, hey, I just bought this building. It's a cool little building I've driven by every day, for the last 25 years, but it was dilapidated. And he said, I want to make this my office. Needs a little bit of a design. And how soon could you do the build out? I close in a month and I'd like to start work right away. And Ernesto had just come on board, and he didn't have anything on his plate. And I said, yeah, we'll measure it up. We'll give you a quote for the design. We'll measure it up. We'll start designing right now, and we'll knock this out. And so we sold the project, lined up the architect, field measured. We're in design within a couple of weeks, and it was under construction, permitted under construction within a month and a half. And that was like eye-opening, as opposed to, like, juxtapose that, another client calls me at that same time, says, hey, I've got this, I want to do a second story addition. I go look at it. I was like, yeah, this makes sense. What's your budget? Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, great. Here's a list of architects I like. Reach out to them, let them know that you're working with me. Hopefully, that'll move you somewhere to the top of the pile, and then reach back out to me once you guys have a timeline. And then I may or may not hear back from them a year down the road. And so immediately my sales process was different. People would call me, hey, I've got this second story addition. Sure thing, I'm going to come over with my architect. We're going to look at it and see if it makes sense. It was just like a sea change in terms of how we sold jobs, how we scheduled jobs. And so, initially we only did a little, a small fraction of our work. But then another architect, someone graduating from his master's program, who I'd known, he had been a carpenter. I'd worked with him on a job. He reached out and said, hey, I'm graduating. I'd like to talk about working with you guys. And ultimately we hired him, and that was our second hire. And that was maybe 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago now. And with each hire, we've just gotten a little bit closer to being able to tackle the bulk of our design work. And sometime in the last year, we really reached that tipping point. And now as a design team, we're backed up a year, but it's, in a lot of ways, that's great, because I can see what's coming down the pipeline in terms of our construction schedule. And really, our sales process, we're no longer selling construction projects. Now we're selling design projects that will be construction projects when they're done. People already know who we are. They know what we build. We have a very well established reputation in town. And having that fully packaged process, just from a sales and scheduling standpoint, is just life changing. But that's just also just scratching the surface. I mean, it's been. I feel like I'm talking too much. See if you have questions, interject.
Did you feel before you kind of brought in this design process and team that your area was design heavy or really required proper design? Because I guess where I'm going with that, it seems as though, there's like major hubs, a lot of time East Coast, West Coast, it's very design driven, and there's a big emphasis on that. And then there's a lot of areas of our country and world that just don't necessarily value design or push for design. And it would seem as though opening up, and bringing in this entire, at this point, 9 people for your design team, was there a need for that, or did you kind of create that need?
I think that when I started this, there was not a need for that. In fact, I had to convince most of my clients 10, 12 years ago that they needed an architect. But I felt really convinced, I had a strong conviction that projects that were architect design look better, function better. The estimation was easier. I don't have to convince you guys, but for all the right reasons, I felt like an architect was important. But 10, 12 years ago, I was convincing people of that. And then I was recommending architects and hoping they came back to me once they had a design. And now I feel like people expect to pay an architect. I feel like there's been a total change in our, I don't know if it's just our local market or if it's a nationwide market change, but
yeah, I guess that's where I was curious, even if it was just something local that you think, something shifted, because I could see a lot of places out in the Midwest that don't necessarily value design or don't feel like that's necessary. I mean, I have trouble pushing it being 10 miles outside of Philadelphia, where you go to North Jersey and it's a completely different story. You kind of have New York, or you go into Philadelphia and it's a different story. And I know that it's taken me, 7 years or so to be able to demand that on every job. And if it's not there, then we can't really move ahead with it. But me personally, it's me handling that or facilitating that process. And then like to build a team of 9 people around that, there's obviously a need for it. But I was curious if that's something that just, kind of organically grew from what you guys were doing in the first place.
I think before we had design in house, and from early on, one of my main competitors in town is a design build company. It's really just 2 guys and a couple of their employees. One of them's a designer, the other one's sort of runs the business end. And a lot of our clients, if they interviewed multiple builders, would interview them, and they'd interview us, and they'd say, well, are you design build? And I really prided myself in not being a design build. I said, no, we're a build. Like, we are builders, carpenters, craftsmen, and that's what we do. We work with other talented architects. And I valued the architects as a team member and as an important part of the process, but I didn't really feel like it was important for us to have architecture in-house in order to be relevant and meaningful and efficient and effective. But but as not a design build, even projects that came to us that were ready to go, they had plans already, or what they wanted to do was simple enough that they didn't really need an architect. There was still a design component. At a basic level, we're picking out finishes, we're fleshing out the cabinet design, we're picking out fixtures, and a lot of that's not architecture, but it's more interior design. But I was a project manager and a little bit of a carpenter, and I didn't want to be doing design, but I found myself doing design on every project. And as we grew as a company, all my other project managers and carpenters were doing design out of necessity. And so even if you say, I guess if one of my competitors says, I don't think you need an architect, what they mean is, we can design this in-house and we can spec this out in-house, and that's fine if they want to do that work. If that builder or that project manager wants to do that work, I personally, maybe it's just in line with the rest of my sort of team building model, and that I feel like I've hired some really good carpenters because they do better carpentry than I do. And I know that as a company, we're going to execute better with some high-end finished carpenters in-house. And the same is true of design. Yeah, I can design some stuff, but I'm no architect, and they bring a skill set and a deep toolbox that's much more sophisticated than mine. And I'd rather pay these guys to, deliver something that's much higher quality than I could do by myself.
Yeah, I was driving today from one job to another, and I guess it was along the same lines of just issues that I find with our industry. And this is, again, kind of along the same lines, where why are we coming to jobs with like a value add that we can handle the design out of necessity, that it's going to be cheaper because we don't have to bring design in-house? Or why isn't that just a standard on every job when somebody goes to get a job done, that they hire somebody to design it first, no matter how big or small? And a lot of times I guess I compare what we do to other industries, or every other industry. And I think my wife's in the furniture industry, and like where they make the furniture, they don't design it. Like, they have designers who design it, and then they have people who cost that, and then they have samples made, and then it goes into production. It's I just feel like there's so many things that we do with our industry that are backwards and don't make sense. And even, with this conversation talking about the owner operators and having employees, and I think that a lot of that is owner operators end up paying and funding jobs because they don't bid a job correctly and their labor gets paid. And it's like, why are our jobs like that? Shouldn't every job be, hey, there's an exchange for the amount of hours you're working towards a budget, your labor costs this much, this is how they're getting compensated, like the automotive industry or every other industry, that you don't have to come up with the price beforehand. And this is, along those same lines where I just feel that anyone who wants to get something done, how many emails do you guys get a week about somebody wanting a project and they want to get a price on it and they don't have any sort of design in place? Like, why is that not the first step for everything that we do? No matter how small it is, a powder room, like there should be a design. The fact that it's not, and that our industry is so backwards when it comes to stuff like that, and you're basically making crap up on the fly or pricing this made believe project, like get a design done and then get it priced.
Well, that's as a company, that's what I've tried to do in terms of as we've gotten bigger and more established in the community. I've decided, hey, here's how we operate. We're a design build company. We design it, and we do the architecture and the interiors, and then we price it, and then we build it, and here's our process. And if you want to work with us, that's the process that you work through. And I think that as in every community, industry leaders, the bigger companies or the companies that are better known, choose how they want to operate, and they set the trends for their own markets. I mean, I could go out there and say that we're going to build whatever people want built and wing it every time and execute pretty well sometimes, but I don't want to. It's not fun. It's stressful. It's expensive. So I guess I feel like we have some control over the market as you get bigger in your own individual markets. You dictate how you want to do business.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's what we've all kind of done, and we've dictated the way that we want our business to be ran that works best for us, whether it's financially, scale, whatever that may be. I just think from the bigger picture, as far as our industry, one of the major issues is just what standard in our industry is so far off of what I believe should be the actual standard. And that, that's even free estimates and everything else, where it just we have so much risk with what we do, and we don't make enough money to offset that risk. And a lot of times, especially if you're not running cost plus, or you're not in that type of market where you're lump sum bid, there's a lot of people who end up funding renovations because there's no design in place and the customer is pickier than they thought, or I think that, the standard should be get a design. If you want to bid it out at that point. If you don't want to spend as much, reduce the level of finishes, pick your builder who's a little less money. It just seems like it's so backwards to me. In this conversation, I guess, I was driving today thinking about that same type of thing, and it got me somewhat frustrated as to just what the standard is for what we do. It's amazing to see even what you guys do with building businesses, and kind of combating that standard and being able to grow and offer health benefits and everything else, because that's not the standard for our residential building industry.
You're right, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think part of it is market driven. I mean, I realize that at this point, my company largely works for high-end clients who can afford what we do, and that's not the average person out there. And so I think that affordable housing, I mean, if you just look out across our community at all the projects that need done, bathrooms, decks, porches, additions, new construction, like not all of them can afford, most of them can't afford the process and the team that we've put together here. And so I think that part of what the problem is just purely market driven by what the average consumer can afford. Maybe that's not okay to say out loud, because I think a lot of people would say, well, you need to lower your prices to make it more affordable. So, I mean, the flip side of that is that I know what it costs to run a business. I know what it costs to provide health insurance. I know what it costs to, outfit this building and keep the lights on, and, to have the type of equipment that I need in order to execute the work that we do. So,
but
I think it's a little bit of a conundrum, but go ahead.
But that conundrum where it's like you need to lower your prices so it is more affordable. This is my thought on that is if you're building custom homes, custom projects, you're building prototypes. It's always something new, right? And if you truly desire to then turn around and market to a more affordable market, there's ways to do that, and one of the ways is by learning from all of these prototypes. And I say that thinking about Benson Wood. And Benson Wood builds, they build custom homes. They have an amazing factory, and they've figured out how to pre-manufacture this stuff in a shop, and it's expensive, like very expensive. But then he's got Unity Homes, and I think he talked about it on our podcast, is that he's taking everything he's learned from these custom homes, the processes in which how to build them, and taking what he's learned from those and apply them into a way that's repeatable. And I think about, because I too will battle with that sometimes. I appreciate being expensive because I want the financial resources for us to put our best work out there. But I'm always challenging our team and myself, thinking about, at some point it would be really nice to, quote unquote, give back to the affordable market with everything that we learn. It's like, let's take the things that we learn
without having to pull your healthcare coverage so that they can then afford you.
Exactly. Yeah, like
that's what is frustrating to me. The fact that it's like, we'll lower your price. All right, well then, we won't give our company profit sharing. We won't give them health insurance. And to me, that's upsetting with our industry, that it's like, if you worked in a hospital in a low income area versus a hospital in like a affluent area, the hospital workers there should be able to get health insurance versus, people who can't afford that. It is a conundrum, but I think a lot of it is self-inflicted because we say yes to customers who are always trying to make the price cheaper or appease people or fit a certain market, where it's just like, if the cost of building that was the standard across the board, then everyone would pay it. That would just be the cost of getting work done, but it's not. There's no structure, there's no benchmark throughout our industry that everyone has to have that minimum.
I feel like, and I might be off base, but I feel like that's specific to the United States too. I feel like what I've seen and read about other countries is that there are minimum standards that are so much higher. Not every other country, obviously, but I think that as a country, we've sort of stooped to the lowest common denominator in construction in terms of minimum standards for insulation and for construction practices, and let those minimum standards set the bar. When I started doing this, people expected, the architects that I was working with were telling their clients to expect $100 a square foot.
And that's why people are building $10,000 square foot houses.
And I think that was a ludicrous number then, and I think there's still people out there who are building for under $200 a square foot. And I feel like the corners that are cut in terms of employee compensation, in terms of quality of materials, in terms of quality of craftsmanship, in order to execute at that level, somehow as a nation, we've allowed that to set the bar for what people expect.
And
it's a uphill battle to speak to that.
And it's like, but even just what you just said, it's like, why are we using, and Telich said this last week, but why is the number that we care about the price per square foot? In the grand scheme of things, where it's like, build a smaller house. And I know that, and I've had a client straight up tell me that he would rather build a bigger house at lesser quality than build a smaller house at a higher quality.
But I also, I think that lesser quality doesn't necessarily need to come by a company who has lesser values.
Agreed.
Or doesn't treat their employees the same way. That's where I think that issue is, that like, that's where people are cutting costs to be able to be more affordable, where it's like, what if everyone had to pay that? Everyone had to cover their employees' health coverage up to a certain amount. And then, like, you now choose your builder based on their actual quality, not on how they're cutting costs.
Right. It's the it's the same conversation we've had a number of times, is that everyone's taking advantage of these opportunities against fair labor, where it's like, let's hire this person because their labor's cheaper, or they're not paying, they don't have benefits, or I think it's the same thing when you beat down your subcontractors and trade partners, where it's like, you're not doing anything. You are not doing them a service by beating them down, because, and I've made this reference before, but they didn't get into the trade to be the least expensive tile installer. They got into the trade because they enjoy doing tile, and over the years they're continually beaten down. How do you do it faster, cheaper, faster, cheaper, faster, cheaper? And when you're just constantly up against how to do it faster and cheaper, you start finding creative ways to reduce quality or skip a step and still get it done. Where the reality is, it's like, no, we want your best. Like, it should be about doing your best work, and over time you should be building efficiency, no doubt. If you do your best work over and over and over, you're realistically going to become faster at it and more efficient at it. But this is going back to what I said earlier. It's like, okay, you're doing the same thing over and over. You're able to do your best work. And then when you are challenged with, hey, I really do want to work with you, but unfortunately this is out of my price range. Rather than it being immediately like, hey, how do I do this cheaper? Like, or maybe I can pay my guy, like find some guys that are cheaper. It's no, look at this as the product. How do you make that product less expensive without impacting your livelihood or the livelihood of anyone that's in your business? And it's building it smaller, or considering different materials, or all of the things you've done on the custom building side. What are the things that you've learned? Okay, well, I've learned that if we build with this size lumber, we can typically save 5%. Or I've learned that I can, reduce my lumber by 10% by switching to advanced frame. Like, there's things that you'll learn along the way that allow you to be more efficient, thus being more cost effective.
Yeah. Do you think, Loren, that you would be able to offer as much as you do as a business if you were smaller in numbers, or if you didn't do the level of quality of work, or like had the customer base that you did? Say you cut your team in half. Do you think that you would be able to offer what you do? Or is the size of your team kind of what's you feel as though is needed to be able to sustain and offer kind of as much as you do as a residential building business?
I mean, I think that we could do half as much work at the same quality, or maybe a little less than half. We've built this team at the same time that we've taken fewer jobs and fewer types of jobs. So I feel like we are sort of right sized for the amount of work and the quality of work that we commit to. I don't want, if I wanted a team half this size, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I feel like I've always wanted to get to just get a little bit better. I mean, that's part of what drives me as a business owner, and as just, a worker year in and year out. I'm just always thinking about how, what can I do this coming year, this coming month to just do better at what I'm doing. And part of that has been when I see good people with skill sets that complement what we do, that might make us better as an operation. I want them to be on my team, and I also want them not to be on my competitor's team. So maybe that's part of it too. But I mean, yeah, I'm sure we could offer a similar level of quality to half as many people. I don't think we'd be any less expensive. I mean, if anything,
I guess that's what I mean. Like, would you be able to offer the benefits, the profit sharing, all of that stuff if you cut, your production or the size of your team in half? Or, like, I guess what I'm getting at is, I feel as though in order to offer all of these things, you need to be into this specialty niche market, super high end like Nick does, and be able to charge the amount to cover the overhead, or you need to be in a more higher end market, do a little bit more volume. Like, would you think that the size you are is kind of what's needed to sustain being able to give back to your employees?
To a degree, I think if I look back 8 years ago, I wasn't paying profit sharing. I was barely paying myself a salary. We weren't making a bunch of money. We were doing pretty good quality work, nothing like what we're doing now. Um, and our processes weren't nearly as good. We didn't, we had a low overhead. I didn't have a shop. I was meeting with new clients in the coffee shop. I don't know. I look back now and I'm shocked that people hired me back then. But so yeah, we have higher overhead now, but we also have a much more sophisticated and well-rounded team, and we've got a wonderful shop that allows us to execute things in a controlled environment that we were trying to cobble together in people's garages or on the job sites back in the day. And we have a wonderful office team that helps us run smoothly, and this design team that again has just revolutionized what we do and what our service looks like to our clients. So yeah, maybe I could get a little leaner, but I don't think that I could offer the same perks to my employees and to our team, or the same quality of experience and product to our clients if we scaled back to that point. And I mean, there's other things that are factors too, like what types of jobs we take. Like, I don't want to build
Yeah.
McMansions for lack of a better term. And we look at jobs that come to us or people, and when they look like, more is more, and they want 10,000 square feet and they care less about. We had someone reach out to us a couple of years ago, and he called me and he said, "I see on your website that you build really nice houses, but it doesn't look like you've built very many really big houses." He's like, "Can you build a big house?"
We don't want it to
And
be
I
nice,
just
though.
like my heart dropped. I was like, we're probably not the right team for you. And I mean that sort of stuck with me. Sure, you can build a nice house, but can you build a really big house? Like, we could probably offer profit sharing and a nice compensation package to our team if we just did some of the McMansions out there and tackled some of these jobs that don't appeal to me as a member of my community, or just my aesthetic sensibilities. But so that's another, I guess, piece of the equation, is just the jobs that we take. We want to work on jobs that feel good. Even the clients that we take, I mean, I'm sure you guys do it too, but every client interaction we have, with a prospective client, we're interviewing them, looking for red flags, just looking for any reason at all that we should just hit the road. And I want it all. I want the right client. I want a job that appeals to me. I want a job that I feel like I'm going to feel good about when I walk away from, in terms of being the builder of that project. And I've built at least one home that I was embarrassed to have been a part of, and everybody on my team knows it, and we all sort of laugh about it. And in retrospect, we made money on it, and I paid some profit sharing out of it, but I wish
Why
I
is
hadn't
that?
taken that job.
Like, why
Because I'm not proud of what I built there. Because we're impacting our community. We're part of the built environment. And you build a house that's going to be there for 100 years or more.
what was wrong with this particular home? Like, what weren't you proud of it?
I don't want to speak.
You don't have to talk specifically.
It was.
But I think that's
Well, anybody on my team who's listening to this knows the job I'm talking about. But it was just a. And there's, I guess, as I think more about it, there's more than one home that probably fits this bill. But it was just a monument to my client's ego, and it was all executed pretty nicely, but it didn't add value to the
Sure.
neighborhood or to the site or to the, it wasn't terribly well insulated. Like, he wanted
Yeah.
more is more. He wanted it to look really, really nice. He didn't give a shit about, like, the interior quality wasn't even that nice, but he didn't know because
Yeah.
it looked big and fancy. And so I guess I could probably pivot my company to building more houses like that, where the clients are willing to spend a bunch of money for something big and pretty, don't really
But
care
that-
about the finish,
but
the
like
level
you
of
said-
finish,
like you said, this
carpentry
is
and
that's not what you're looking to do. And despite, I think about, I've had conversations where people are like, hey, why don't you just stick to the small renovations, or why don't you stick to those super high-end bathroom projects that you guys have done? You said that they were profitable, that you said that you had a lot of fun doing them. Why not just niche down and do that? And I'm like, because it's not what I want, and it's not what I want to be known for. It's, these aren't that's not the type of project that I want people to know us for, building really crazy homes and really nice homes at a really high level, ground up, full home. Like that's what that's why we're going after that. And this goes to a question about this whole design build, because I certainly have thought about bringing design in house, and the reason I haven't explored it beyond just a thought is that I really like working with architects, and I want to work with I want to work with different architects, and a large part of me wants to do that, but there is a part of me that says I'd also just love to have the design in house to control it, and then refine these thoughts of what a home is to me, like what, my aesthetic and everything else, and really, again, niche down into building a very particular style home and being known for that. And so I go back and forth and I battle. It's like, do I want to be design build, or do I want to stick with the architect side? And as of right now, I definitely see the benefit of having design in house. Even on our millwork, in our millwork company, it's like we sub out all of our shop drawings, and they're great. The drawings come in, they're great, but we can't control when we get them. We can't, if there's a red line, it's not like, hey, you're walking in the office and adjusting something. It's, taking the time to draft an email and getting it over to them, and then they got to find a slot. I mean, I totally see the benefit of having design in house. I guess my question would be, do you see any negative for having design in house?
Sure. And I think that, I mean, so Spring Point Architects, a local firm that I worked with a ton over the years, we're probably doing, I'm trying to rack my brain, but I think we're probably doing, we're doing a project with them right now. They're fantastic architects. These three ladies broke off of this firm that Ernesto was a part of when I first started working with him. And they're very talented. Each of them as principals in this firm have unique talents and skills. And I've loved working with those ladies and working on their designs. And they bring, a unique vision to the projects. And, the fact that we now do all of our design in-house, or the vast majority of it, means that we don't get to work with them, or get to work with, a bunch of other firms, both local and not so local, who are really talented. And I was in the same place as you, Nick, when I my dad, from multiple times over the years, suggested that I bring an architect, and I always just totally dismissed it. It's like, I've got great architects, Dad. I like working with them. They're unique and creative, and I wouldn't get this breadth of custom construction projects if I was doing my own thing. And I do think that that's a big downside, a big potential downside. I guess for me, process, like the things that we say we care about as a company, Nick, like when we look internally and when we hire new people and when we talk to our clients, we care about paying attention to the details. We care about a highly positive working environment and a highly positive client experience. We also talk about, supporting the community and lowering the impact on the environment of the work that we do. Like, none of those things are, say, like, we care about being really diverse architecturally, or working on, with every single architect, or being open to working with every architect in town. And so I guess, like, the guiding principles that drive who we are as a company and the work that we do are more about quality and process and impact on our community and our environment. And I feel like I'm able to drive towards those guiding principles with an internal design team that, we might be less multifaceted than if we also worked with Spring Point and Brownsmith Studios and the handful of other architects that I really admire in town. But at the end of the day, I can't, working with them causes my process to suffer relative to what it looks like when my design team's in house. And I didn't, until I had that, I couldn't appreciate how powerful that was. And not a day goes by now when I don't reach out to someone on the design team. Hey, help me understand this detail. Can you speak to the client about this? Hey guys, we need to circle a wagon around these things. This was all spec'd out, but the client wants to pivot. And having that And that's just like speaking to, I guess, the client experience and my own personal experience, on a project, just having them at your beck and call. Today I walked in the shop, and my shop manager was working on a custom table for a client. One of the architects was in there. They're looking at, I just posted this on my stories, but they're looking at some edge profile details and pivoting on the design a little bit. And that's just, we have that all the time. I mean, if you walk in our design room, there are project managers and carpenters walking in and out, picking their
That's what I
brains.
love about
uh,
having the millwork,
I would
and that's what I've always enjoyed because the millwork became this like creative, opportunity for us where we would constantly push the level of creativity, and that's where I see the benefit of having stuff in house. I think about painters constantly. It's like I don't know if I've ever thought about having plumbing, electrician, or anything under our wing, but design, millwork, paint, carpenters, all of those things are just, it would be, those are the things that I think I dwell over the most, where it's like it would be great to have that in house. And, going back to something I said in the beginning, the biggest thing I struggle with is the lack of training and education. And what's really hot on, our mind, I'm speaking for Tyler and I, is that, 5 years ago, we all everyone talked about was how we need to get the interest back in the trades, get the interest back in the trades. And fast forward, it's okay, the interest is here. Loren, you said that you have people sending your resume constantly. I do as well. And it's mainly people that want to get into this trade. And it's like, that's great. We've created the interest. People are interested. There is no longer education for them. And unless you have a robust team of people that can not only execute at a profitable level, but also train and mentor people that come in at ground zero, how do you expect to actually build out a department in your company of people that just want to learn and have and give them that opportunity? And you know I've kind of alluded to the fact that the Modern Craftsman, we want to do something bigger with it, and that's really where our mind is at. Is we need we need to fix this. We bringing it in house. I'm so on board with, but it's like before we do that, there has to be some sort of structure. So let me turn that into a question. You bring in painters, you bring in design, you bring in carpenters. How have you created a structure where I come to you and say, hey, I don't know how to do carpentry and I want to come work for you, and what's my career path? How do I go from being 0% educated in this to making $50 an hour as a lead?
So we've really uh, developed that process over time. Early on when I first started doing this, I just wanted to hire people that knew everything or knew way more than I did because I needed
Mm-hmm.
them to get the work done. And then as we grew as a company and I sort of developed I better understood who I wanted to be around and who I wanted to be as a builder. We started weeding some of those people out, and it was more personality than at some point than maybe quality of work. But we build a team, and I mean, fast forward to today, we have a really big team, and so I think we're able to offer a lot of those training components in house. We have sort of set pay scales that we explain to people. We call them goal setting meetings rather than annual reviews, but we sit down with each employee, ideally, especially the newer ones, after 3 months and then after 6 months, and ideally twice a year, although that's become hard as we've gotten more people. Uh, but to understand what their goals are and to help put in place. I was a teacher before this, right? And so uh, maybe a lot of my professional development program in house is mirrored after what I learned in education, and a couple of my project managers also came out of teaching. But essentially putting putting together an individualized education plan around each employee. And if they want to be a finished carpenter, okay, well, we're going to look for opportunities to schedule you with these guys, and you're going to mentor under them, and they're going to teach you specific stuff. And I'll meet with those lead carpenters that they're working with, and get feedback on their skill sets, and so build them up internally. And I guess, Tyler, back to your question earlier about if we got half size. Well, yeah, we're big, but it allows us to do things like that, like create a career path for in a training program for some of these new people, that we wouldn't have if we weren't this size, and so for me, I think that a lot of people look at our company locally and assume that we've gotten this big because we want to be highly profitable. I don't I know people won't believe this, but I don't care if we're more profitable this year than we were 4 years ago, or if in 2 years we're less profitable than we are this year. I really want to be proud of the company that I run, and I want to achieve the goals that I set for myself. And profit's just like paying the bills, like you need it, but it's not like a big number. And I think part of like part of the size of who we are is being able to offer those educational opportunities in-house. I don't think they replace like a broader educational offering. And I agree with you, Nick, that we get people, most of the people that reach out to us are coming from other industries. Hey, I want to quit my job working at the brewery. You guys do awesome stuff. I'd love to work with you. I don't really have a place for all those people. I wish that there was a trade program, but I do have place for one or two people, to work up through our system.
And I think that's just the frustrating thing, is that there's just no training, and I shouldn't say there's no training. There is training, but there's a lack of training, and there's a lack of understanding on how to go from one step to the next. Even internally for me, where I've sat down with a lot of my team, and they're like, I just don't understand how to get from where I am today to, the next step. Like, what classifies me as an apprentice versus a carpenter, and what does that look like? And it starts with, obviously building out the job description and things like that. But beyond that, there needs to be, it can't just be on my decision, right? I can't just say, all right, now you're a carpenter. There should be a roadmap as to how to get there, and whether it's the amount of time spent or the chance that you're able to successfully complete X amount of tasks. Like, my point is that for me, and internally for NS Builders, we don't have that structure outlined, and I want to, but I think that it's deeper than just internally, and I think it needs to be industry wide. Because I think about...
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. And I think that some industry-wide standard would be awesome. Something we could just adopt in-house would be like magic, because we're all sort of working under our own roofs trying to solve the same problems, it sounds like. But I think on the flip side, it's also easy to say, geez, I wish this is a more professionalized... We just hired a Finnish carpenter from England, and he went through he went to college, he got licensed back home, and he's a fantastic Finnish carpenter. He went through a real formal program that we don't really have an equivalent for here locally. Yeah. And so I think it's easy to say, geez, we just need a more structured educational program. But on the flip side, two anecdotes. Like, my wife went to law school. She graduated from law school. She didn't know how to be a lawyer. She just knew some theoretical stuff about law, and then she had to go work for a law firm somewhere to learn how to become a lawyer. And then she found out she didn't like being a lawyer, so that was a big miss. And just today, we just hired two new architects, recent graduates from our IU architecture program, and I just popped in to talk to one, and she said, I feel like I learned more, just yesterday than, I think she than I did, this whole past year. And I think she was kidding, but only a little bit. I think she also was like, wow, I'm doing some really practical stuff on a set of construction drawings that are going to get built, whereas I've been doing some really, theoretical stuff. And I think that I've seen that in some of my Finnish carpenters have wanted to take some classes up in Indy, and I've looked at those classes, and then I say, you can do that, and I'd be happy to help subsidize that maybe, But what's going to make you better at doing the work that we do is doing more of the work that we do and working with the guys on our team and girls on our team who execute that really well, and learning from them. And I think that I'm not trying to say that a formal education program wouldn't be awesome. I'm just saying I don't think it's going to be the end all and the be all.
No, I don't think so either. And I don't think it's not black and white. And the reason that I think the more formal education would be beneficial is because what happens is your finished carpenter might be exposed to, I don't know, 20% of what carpentry is, because that's what your projects basically allow him to execute on. Where taking formal training or going to law school, you learn a little bit of everything. You're getting a bunch of the skill set, or just related to carpentry. It's like, hey, yeah, you might be a finished carpenter, but here's how to frame a roof. This is how you're figuring out how to do a complex roof. Or these are the things that you need to pay attention to when you're setting sills on a foundation. And yeah, they might never do that in the real world, but having a basic understanding of all of that, that's what the North Bennett Street School here in Boston does, is that they basically fast track them through like step one of every facet of carpentry, or as much as they can, and not every facet, but as much as they can in a short amount of time. And the goal is for them to be exposed to everything. But now it's all right. That's great. They've been exposed to everything. They've completed step one, and they are typically released to the workforce at that point. But then they never return to that. And what happens is most of the time they go into a specific position that they then are narrow, like in this narrow path of just doing that particular part of carpentry. Where I think there's a lot of benefit that can come from continuing to learn about things that you might not get exposed to in building or in carpentry. And that's where, I've made the reference to like the union, where the union, there's this requirement to have continuing education, where it's like you go to school and you continue to learn about things outside of what you do on a daily basis. And it's not a matter of like the union's doing it right nor wrong. I'm not getting into that conversation. I'm strictly just talking about the fact that there is this quote unquote requirement for continued education that allows someone to further understand what their industry has to offer outside of the small pocket of what they're doing on a daily basis.
I don't disagree with that. And as you're saying that, I was thinking one of our super skilled finished carpenters, we were framing a roof and he came to help out, and he's like, I don't actually know what I'm doing. I've never framed a roof before. And I was like, what? You can do the type of carpentry, and you never even set trusses before. And it sort of blew my mind. But you're right that we get so specialized. And you said maybe they only get to do 20% of what's out there. It's probably way less than that. It's probably 5%. Yeah. But so you're absolutely right. But what's that worth? I mean, I don't know. I think it would be valuable. We just don't have that.
I agreed. And it's also not for everyone. Not everyone wants to go out. Like for me, if you put me in a house and said, Nick, you got to trim this whole interior of the house, I wouldn't question it. I know I could do it. I know how to go through the motion. I could be efficient at it. If you said, hey, Nick, I want you to go frame that roof and it's got hips, valley, I would have to bring my book and read on how to do that, like step by step, because I've never had the opportunity to frame a roof. Now, if someone sat down and said, hey, I can teach you how to lay out a complex roof, like Ryan Sweener. He's cutting an entire roof on the ground, stacking it up before it even goes up, before the plates are even set, because he knows the math. He knows the math, and he can do that. If he walked me through that, yeah, I would eventually understand it, but I've just never been taught that. And I think that if I eventually understood that, it would make me approach other parts of carpentry in a different way. And
I think that's true, but I guess I also, like, at what cost? I mean, one nice thing about being able to enter carpentry in the U.S. without because there is no real formal program, is that kids don't enter into the industry with a huge, with a mountain of debt because they were required to go to 4 years of college before they could even start swinging a hammer or put on a tool belt. And so I think there's pros and cons
I don't
to,
think it's
yes,
a.
they are not well rounded, but
I don't think it's a 4-year college. I don't think it's anything like that. I honestly think it's much more informal than that. Go through a fast track 1 year, get you from step 0 to step 1, like something like the North Bennett Street offers you, and then beyond that, then maybe it's 4 hours a month or 2 hours a week or something where it's if you want to go from step 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3 and 3 and so on and so forth and advance your career as a good carpenter, here you can either stick it out and just work day in and day out on a job and continue to progress that way, or hey, 2 hours a week you can dedicate to extracurriculum education, or 4 hours.
I also see like the value in that, Nick, where it's not necessarily even post-graduated from high school where, you have to make a decision. Do you want to go to college? Do you want to enter the trades? You've never done either at this point. And it's like maybe you got your feet wet doing some carpentry in the summers in high school, or like took a 1-month program in high school and you're like, hey, you know what? I do enjoy this. This is something I want to explore. Now, when you graduate from high school, you're picking a career path that you're not just giving up on college and entering the trades. Now you're actually like, hey, I did this some. I do have a decent idea of what's going on, and I now want to take this path. And I think that, trade programs in high school and classes obviously helped that a tiny bit. For me, I see value there where it's like you're not foregoing college and picking a career path without ever having any experience doing so.
I think that I think that this is coming. If you look back 20 years ago or more, when I was in the 90s, maybe early 90s, when I was in high school, like construction was not a viable option in anyone's mind. It was not a professionalized career choice. It was plan B if you couldn't cut it in college or if you were unsuccessful. And at least that was my perspective, and I think it was a lot of people's perspective in the just, if you look at the educational, going to college, a 4-year degree was the one single measure of success, for kids growing up in the U.S., I think, beyond college sports or something, or professional sports. And so I don't flash forward to today. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that people see the trades as a real viable option towards a profession that's respected and regarded, even beyond other people in the trades. And I think that's been the first step towards professionalizing carpentry and construction and just the trades in general. And I think that as like the wave that I see, Nick, you pointed out 5 years ago we couldn't find enough skilled people. Now people are really interested. I feel like now that the market's there, now that people are, out there looking for experiences and looking for opportunities, that people are going to, just like you're like, hey, I want to create these opportunities. I want to create a program that helps give people a path towards professionalism and success. I think we're on, I think if we look out 10 years from now, we'll see lots of programs building to support these people. And give them a path towards professionalism and getting that sort of broad experience. I don't think a 4-year degree is ideal. I don't even think 4-year degrees across the board are great for other industries either.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
I mean, I also think that we should be able to offer something more than, hey, you can get into our career and you're not going to have debt. Like that's a huge selling feature of our industry. And it's kind of a kick in the teeth where it's like, hey, you could be in the trades and you're not going to have to pay to do it. I think that there should be more pros to getting involved in the trades than just that. We have to sell it a little bit harder than that.
Well, I mean,
I agree, and yeah, I mean, I don't know what the solution is, and personally, that's not really. I don't see that as my mission. Like I'm busy building my my own little corner of the world
Right.
here. I'm not too worried about building that broader educational piece, but I do think that there's a big need for it, and I'd love to, be a small part of that. But it's just not something I find myself thinking. I'm just too inwardly focused. I'm just looking at our own team, our own operation, how
And
we can improve things.
and kind of as we wrap up here, to relate that back to something you said earlier, is that we all all of us that are listening to this, that the three of us sitting here talking, we all get into our own world and we do all of these things alone. There is no, like, there's no centralized process. And I think, and I'm speaking specifically to our industry because it's obviously all I know. But I think about the way, we estimate, the way we do our accounting. All of that stuff is built internally. It's from complete scratch. Where it's like, if there was a plug, if someone said, "Hey, here's how you run a construction business. Here's all the documents that you need. Here's the best contract to protect you with a client. Here's what you're going to need for insurance requirements. This is how you should process your accounting. This is who you should have on your." And there are companies out there that do this, but I guess it can be related back to the barrier of entry to get into this, where it's anyone can be a builder, anyone can be a contractor. There's not a lot of hoops you got to jump through to do that. But we're not doing ourselves any service, as the industry as a whole, by internalizing all of that. And that's fine. Like you said, you're focused on your small corner of the world and having a small part in it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we think about the amount of effort that goes into, like, figuring it out internally, imagine being able to reduce the amount of effort it takes to get up and running into a profitable company, where you can then change that focus to being more creative and taking it from level 3 to level 10 or whatever.
You're absolutely right. And I misspoke a little bit in that I do feel often like we're all fighting the same battles. I'll read a book on construction and I'll be like, this is exactly the same thing that I'm battling. And this guy wrote this 30 years ago. Like, why didn't I just read this 10 years ago and then not make the same mistakes? I do think that I do want to be part of those broader conversations. I guess just specifically the educational component,
Totally.
creating this broader nationwide education piece hasn't been something that I've thought much about.
It's a monster.
But I have thought, yeah, yeah. I just feel like you can only bite off so much individually and as a company. But I do think that I have wanted to be part of. I think that there is shared experiences and opportunities to learn from each other and with each other as an industry beyond just like that educational piece. I mean, specifically around how you run your company and how you price your jobs and how you execute your jobs and how I think that there's a lot to be said to sharing resources and learning. Just the educational piece itself hasn't been something that I've thought much about outside of educating my own team. And I know you guys need to close up here. Nick, I wanted to circle back to one thing you asked earlier, which is the downside to having design in-house.
Yeah.
And I do think, we just finished a restaurant project. It was one of the coolest projects we've ever done in terms of finished detail and just super, super cool project. It was designed completely out of house. We didn't do any of the finished details. I mean, we did the construction management and the finished carpentry, and it was our team that executed everything. But it was an outside architect, and I loved that project, and I don't wish we'd designed it. I really appreciated that opportunity to work with that project. And to me, that didn't seem, largely we do our own design. When people come to us with a design already, these days we just say, no, we can't really do that because we've already got this queue of projects. But every once in a while, one comes along that we want to be a part of, and we take on. So I don't think it has to be totally mutually exclusive. I think you can have it both ways. That said, if you're only doing one project at a time, you probably can't have it both ways.
You'd have to be real lean and planning way out in advance there. No, I mean, I think at the core of it, it really just comes back to what you said earlier is, what do you want? What is your market? What's your market capacity? Being struck. Something I didn't share earlier, but I remember being in a position where, we were waiting on architects for jobs to start, and we were like, we need the work. The work we were supposed to start construction, and we're waiting on the architect, and that's a real I can relate to that, and that's a big reason as to why bringing design in house would make sense. So I see the benefit of both sides of it, and again, it really comes back down to, what your goals are and what you're looking to accomplish.
All I can say is that if my choices were to sacrifice doing projects like that restaurant, and we're doing a super cool project over in Columbus right now that's designed by a group of architects, from over in Columbus, and one locally, but not our team, and it's super cool. But if I had to pick between doing our run-of-the-mill projects that have our in-house team and the process and the product and the experience we're able to provide there, and miss out on those really interesting, unique projects, I would give those up immediately, because I think my life and my team's days and my clients' experiences are so much better day in and day out. And we talk about it all the time, even when we're working on these neat projects. There's a little bit of just observation that, man, it's easier when we're working with our own team, and you just see it day in and day out. And I don't mean to proselytize. I don't think it's right for everybody, but I won't go back.
No, and I think that there's big picture decisions there too, for the health of yourself and the company, and obviously that's why you would choose one versus the other.
Yeah, but I also recognize that, it's probably clear from the company that we run, but I'm a little bit of a control freak in that I like to have as much in-house here, and I think most builders probably are, or else why are they they doing the whole thing? Why are they not just doing the trim or whatever? But so there's a little bit of that, but I suspect that if either of you had an architect in-house and you saw how that changed your processes and just filled in the gaps. How often are you just trying to figure out a little detail where you could send to your architect, hey, can you put this in CAD or Revit and help me work this out real quick? Yeah. And it's like magic. It just happens in the office. They're like, yep, here you go. Alex will shoot that to you on Slack in a minute. Or, and it's magic. It's like having these magicians back here in the office, just at your beck and call. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I have to come back to the office and get a marker and just draw it on the whiteboard for me to understand what I'm trying to work through. And that's something we talk about constantly. It's like, if we could just have someone sketch this and work it out in a model, it would be easier. Yeah, you're not helping my decision.
I used to use SketchUp. I used to use Google SketchUp, 10, 12 years ago. I was using it all the time. I don't even know how to access it anymore. Like, I could figure it out, but why do it when you've got the design team who have powerful, tools way more powerful than SketchUp, but also SketchUp and the time to do it because they're sitting at their desk working on design all day long.
Loren, I appreciate you being on again, man.
Yeah, it was good talking with you guys.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
I'll be curious to see if you hit that 100-person mark by the time we chat next.
By the time the podcast is released.
I hope not. No, I think we're stable right here.
All right. You heard it here first. 65 is his cap. Well, if people want to see what you guys are doing and what you're up to, where should they find you?
We can Instagram, Loren Wood Builders. That's Loren Wood Builders, and then we got a website and Facebook. We probably don't post on social nearly as much as we should, uh, but we try. And if you Google us, I'm sure you'll find us.
Very cool. Loren, thank you so much. We'll chat soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was a fun conversation, fellas. Thank you.
I was on his website looking through, it's scrolling and scrolling and scrolling of just people and people. But I feel like we went down two conversations almost simultaneously, but the whole design build versus build and design, it's just so interesting to me because I do go back and forth, and I feel like Tyler, you must with some of the smaller projects and thinking about like how much easier it would be with design, but then it's like but how much of a pain in the ass it can be when you have to sub it out and you're waiting and waiting.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing on larger projects where there's the amount of work that's required would be tough. For me, I do have a couple of architects and engineers on hand that if I have a project where I potentially may need something, they can produce something pretty quickly. And then, it doesn't, if I get hung up a couple days, it's not a huge deal, but I don't have the overhead that you guys have or kind of the schedule demands that you guys have where 3 days hung up on a job where are you going to put those people? I don't have to deal with that. I have a lifetime of stuff that I can catch up on. So for me, sometimes it's a needed break. But yeah, that would be very difficult waiting on somebody else to be able to handle those.
Yeah. And then the whole education side too is just, even as he alluded to, it's like he wants to be part of it, but it's a bear. We are struggling to formally train, and maybe formally is not the right word, but to just give the opportunity for training. I see even internally so many people jump on board thinking it's going to be different. Tyler, I know you've talked about it before. It's like people think that the process in building and remodeling is different because of what they see on something like social media. But if there was an actual playbook of, hey, this is how you should approach the industry, and this is how you can grow and build a career out of this industry, I think just having that information available would help guide a lot of people in the right direction.
Or just some sort of standard, somewhere to turn, at least, to get you off on the right foot and kind of start it in the right direction.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, next week we have, I was just looking at who we had. We have Emily Clark from Clark & Co. Homes. So we'll be chatting with them. Actually, Dan and Emily, I believe. And we have a couple of new reviews this week, but we don't have anyone tagging their name, so we don't have any swag to give out. I did update the website or the Instagram. There is a link in our bio now to buy the merch. If you guys are interested, hit that up. Speaking of merch, thank you to our sponsors, Upstate Merch, Reno Run, Rock Wool, and Duration Molding and Millwork.